tekkorin, vad du öga faltorin, i terminum mera mimis bruning, vad du öga faltorin, tekkorin, vad du öga faltorin, räcker mjölk i mir morgen, fälgarna fälliga och sakrimer.
Chapter 1. The Beginning. Our saga begins after Grimsson and Bjorn returned from raiding in England. They had been gone for 6 months and were rewarded very well. Grimsson and Bjorn had gone raiding in England with King Ragnar. The raids in England paid off very nicely most of the time. While there, they were also looking for land to settle and farm. Times were hard and food was always in high demand. King Ragnar knew this and always looked for more land for his people to settle. Grimsson and Bjorn returned to his mother's home. Like always, she greeted them with loving arms and always wanted to hear about their adventures. It was a cool fall morning, and the leaves had begun to change. Brenda rarely raided anymore, after suffering a disabling leg wound from a Saxon spear piercing her upper right leg. She did not go on raids anymore. The wound never healed right, and she could no longer get around. Walking was painful, and she often had to stop and let the pain subside. She stayed and attended the farm while Grimsson and Bjorn went on the raids. The wealth that they gathered sustained them through the harsh Norwegian winters. Grimsson was only 19 and had already made a name for himself. Everyone knew who he was. People talked about him and what he had done in battle everywhere he went. It seemed that Grimsson was a name building a legendary reputation that was even starting to shadow King Ragnar's. This made Grimsson smile. He loved to fight and felt alive in battle. Combat was second nature to him, and came with great ease. He loved the sounds of metal banging against metal, the smell of coppery earth that blood and earth made when mixed. Grimsson had fallen for a local farmer's daughter, Alva. She was as beautiful as the morning sun in spring. Her voice was magical, soft and sweet. Whenever he thought of her, his heart would almost pound out of his chest. His breathing would quicken, and he could not think straight. Many men tried to win her hand in marriage, but she loved Grimsson. Every time they locked eyes, the entire world stood still. It was as if they were the only beings who existed. One morning, Grimsson could not wait any longer. He had to have Alva as his wife. He would do anything to marry her. He could not see living life without her at his side. So he went to Alva's house and spoke with her father, Samson. Samson was a great warrior and had raided with Grimsson on many occasions. Grimsson asked Samson if he could wed Alva. Grimsson told him she was his only love, and that he could not, and would not, love another. Samson, like he always did when he pondered something, gave Grimsson a mean scale, while rubbing his chin, and said, "Only if you go to Mount Oxcolton and retrieve a spear that I have placed for the right man to find. It is at the highest cave guarded by a creature so mean that I nearly never made it out alive." Samson has done this to ensure his daughter only married the strongest Drengar. Grimsson grinned and stated, "Is that it? If this were what it took to marry her, then by Odin's beard, it would be done." Grimsson loved a challenge, and he did not believe in monsters. He figured it was Samson just trying to scare him off. After all, Grimsson knew deep down in his heart that Alva was meant for him. She was a gift to him from the gods. There is no one fairer or more stunning than Alva. Grimsson remembered a story about a Valkyrie that fell in love with a mighty Drengar. Odin was displeased by this, which caused her to sleep. He set challenges for the warrior to free her. If he did so, then they could be together forever. She would never wake if he failed, and they would never be together. This task felt much like the saga, but with a much better ending. No force on Midgard could stop him from retrieving that spear. Grimsson looked at Samson, then smiled and set out on his journey to win the right to marry Alva. Grimsson had taken only his axe and knife to retrieve the spear. His bearded axe was given to him by his mother Brenda. Brenda had taken this axe into battle on many occasions, and it had killed many of her enemies. It was a fine crafted axe, made by the blacksmith Hako. Hako was known near and far for his craftsmanship. The clip knife was given to him by Bjorn Ironsides, oldest son of King Ragnar after Grimsson's first battle. Grimsson had wandered upon 15 Northumbrian soldiers spying on the raiding party. This was Grimsson's first raid. Grimsson only had his mother's axe and no armor. Grimsson quickly dispatched the men and returned to camp with all 15 of their heads, upon placing the heads at the feet of King Ragnar and earning the respect of all who were there. This was a feat that no one his age had ever done before. The whole camp talked about it. Quickly Grimsson's reputation grew. Whenever King Ragnar looked upon him, he smiled. Grimsson could see the joy in his eyes. Bjorn Ironsides was always with Grimsson. They had fought side by side in several battles. They were like brothers. Maybe Bjorn Ironsides knew what Grimsson did not. They were inseparable. Once Bjorn Ironsides was lying under a large oak tree, napping when 3 East Anglian men snuck upon him. Before the men could overpower Bjorn Ironsides, Grimsson threw his mother's axe and buried it to the handle in the forehead of one of them. This caused Bjorn Ironsides to awaken, and he quickly killed the next. Before Bjorn Ironsides could attack the third, Grimsson threw his knife and buried it into the man's neck. Blood poured out of the man and he fell dead. Bjorn looked at Grimsson, and they both started laughing. Bjorn Ironsides gifted him his knife for saving him. After a day of travel, Grimsson reached the foot of Mount Oxcolton. He looked up as far as he could and could not see the top of the mountain through the clouds. He wondered if the mountain reached up to the bottom of Asgard. Grimsson started his travel up the mountain pass. The further up he went, the colder the air got. After a full day's travel, he had not yet reached halfway up. He sat down on a rock and pulled out some dried meat. As he began to eat the meat, his mind drifted off to Alva. He could see her doing the laundry. She glowed in the sunlight. Grimsson was so lost in the thought that he did not feel the cold air seeping into his bones. His mind was fixed on Alva. Her beauty had no limits. After about 15 minutes of rest, he started up the mountain again. The climb began to get harder and harder. The air became thinner, and he finally realized it was getting colder. It hurt to breathe. Well into the night, Grimsson reached a cave that Samson told him about. Peering in, all he could see was darkness. A feeling of dread upon Grimsson, and every fiber of his being began to tighten. The hairs on the back of his neck began to rise, and his heart beat hard and fast. Grimsson had never felt this before. In the many battles that he had been in, this feeling never came to him. Why is it doing it now? Something was different about this place. He felt as if he was being hunted and not the one who was hunting. Maybe Samson was not lying. Why else would he feel this way? He had been stalked many times in his young short life, but never felt like this. This was alien to him. Every part of his being was screaming, run. He never ran from anything. Why would he want to run now? He closed his eyes. I must focus, he thought. I must complete this task. Grimsson started in when he heard a deafening howl erupt from inside the cave. Grimsson backed up and took a fighting stance. He started shaking. Why am I shaking, he thought. I must ready myself for the fight that was about to come. Out of the darkness came the creature he had only heard of in tales. It was a giant black wolf with glowing yellow eyes. Drool fell from his mouth. With every movement, he could see the beast's muscles bulge out. On all fours, it was nearly the height of Grimsson. In his travels in England, he has heard the Saxons talk about werewolves. Could this be one? Could this be what they were talking about? Grimsson knew now that this would be a fight to the death, that he was not in a typical fight. He could smell death coming from the creature. Its eyes felt like they were peering into his soul. Just the sight of seeing this thing sent fright through Grimsson. He thought to himself that this must be an offspring of Fenrir. The wolf started circling Grimsson, snarling and barking. He could feel the heat from its breath. His breath smelt like death and felt like fire. Then the wolf did something Grimsson never expected. It stood up on its hind legs. It must have stood 9 feet tall and was covered in muscles. This was no ordinary wolf, he thought. How could this creature stand like a man? Remembering what the Saxons told him, they said the werewolf would walk and run like a man, but preferred to be on all fours. They could move faster and hide easier when they were on all fours. If this was the case, then maybe Grimsson had a chance. Grimsson started mimicking the wolf's movements. Both were walking in a circle. Grimsson was studying how the creature's body moved. He was waiting to notice the muscle movement that they made before an attack. The creature reared back and swung its long claws at Grimsson. He barely had time to duck and move. He felt the wind from its attack. This creature is both strong and fast, thought Grimsson. And before he knew it, the wolf was upon him. These things definitely move fast, he thought. The wolf backhanded Grimsson and sent him flying against the cave wall. Grimsson hit the wall, and he fell to the ground. Pain shot through his body. He never felt such strength before. Blood started to flow from the back of Grimsson's head, mouth, and nose. His vision was becoming blurry. I must fight through this, he thought. I cannot die here. Grimsson began to doubt that he could win this. How could this be? Grimsson had never been in trouble like this before. He had always had the upper hand in a fight. It would be easy for him to give up and die, he thought. It would be a great death, worthy of Valhall. The wolf struck again, and this blow nearly knocked out Grimsson. He barely reached his feet when the wolf was upon him again. Grimsson could feel the creature's heat from its body. This is it, he thought. He thought, I will die here and never get to be with Alva. The wolf reared up, reaching its hand back and high over its head. It is about to finish me. I am about to die, Grimsson thought. Then Grimsson saw it. Why did it take him so long to notice? In this position, the beast was open for an attack, with a quick reflex from out of nowhere. It was as if the gods were helping him in this battle. Grimsson buried his knife between the underarm and shoulder of the great wolf. Blood poured from the wound. The creature reared up and let out an agonizing howl of pain. The creature started stumbling back. He did it. He hurt the wolf. He knew now that he would be able to kill this thing. If I can hurt it, I can kill it, he thought. Grimsson studied the creature for a moment. He was waiting to make his move. The creature began to back off and stumble backward. That is it, he thought. Now is my chance. At this moment, Grimsson seized his opportunity and buried his axe to the handle between the eyes of the wolf. The howl came to a sudden stop. The wolf stood there for a second and fell face first to the cave floor. Taking no chances, Grimsson removed his knife from the wolf's shoulder and slit its throat. It was over. He had done it. He won against this mighty creature. Grimsson let out a mighty yell. Grimsson sat down next to the wolf. Blood dripped from the back of his head, nose, and mouth. Grimsson was in much pain. He needs to rest and regain his composure. Grimsson tried fighting it, but the darkness overtook him. He passed out and fell on the floor next to the beast. After a couple of hours, Grimsson started to stir. His head was foggy, and he felt like he was drunk. Standing and walking was challenging, but slowly improving. Pain riddled his body. After a moment, Grimsson approached the beast and started skinning the wolf. He put the skin around him, and instantly he felt warmth. This skin works well against the cold, he thought. I might have to turn it into a cloak. Grimsson went into the cave to retrieve the spear. It was dark. It smelled of death and decay, and he could not see a thing. Feeling around in the dark, he put his hand in something wet and slimy. It smelled horrible. Grimsson almost vomited from it. He felt around again and found a wooden shaft. Upon further inspection, he realized it was a torch. Grimsson pulled out his flint, and using his knife, he struck the flint a couple times, and the torch lit. The darkness unwillingly gave to the light. Grimsson's eyes adjusted. There in a pile of rocks stood the spear erected. It was just an ordinary spear, not what Grimsson was expecting. The chewed bones of many warriors who dared to retrieve the spear were on the cave floor. Then he saw what he put his hand in. It was a pile of shit from the wolf.